Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. 'Tis I, Paul Mount. And yes, I put on my big boy trousers and I've come back out into the cinema room. It's still cold, but it's going to be cold for a few months. So I thought I'd brave it back out into the cinema room. The storm has abated. So I'll bung the heating on and it's getting quite nice and toasty in here now because it's time for another retro movie review. A horror classic, in a strange way. It's a horror classic that really wasn't a hit when it came out, and it's developed this bizarre cult following ever since. And you still find new merchandise, like those wretched Funko Pop things that people obsess about, and you get action figures, and it's got a strange footprint in horror cinema despite not having made much money in the box office. It's one of those films that became a cult hit through the power of home video. I'll talk more about that later. The film I'm talking about, the film I'm about to fire up and watch, is Killer Klowns from Outer Space. I think it's fair to say that films probably don't get much cultier than Killer Klowns from Outer Space, 1988. I'm going to call it a horror comedy that sort of came and went. It is interesting. I think I remember seeing this probably a year or so after it came out, and I've seen it since. I've only seen it a couple of times. I watched it again tonight on a glistening new Blu-ray which has just come out, and it looks fantastic. For a film that cost just over $1 million, it looks like $1 million. It's great. It looks fantastic. It's crazy, it's wacky, it's macabre in places, it's quite funny. It is one of those films, as I hinted in the intro, that found favour with the home video market back in the 80s. Very often, films which we now regard as sort of signature moments in cinema didn't really connect in cinema. I think the prime example is The Shawshank Redemption, which really didn't do very well when it came out. But as it appeared on home video, for those of you who don't remember, films used to be released on video cassettes, Shawshank became a huge hit and is now regarded as one of the best films ever made. I don't think the same is said of Killer Klowns from Outer Space, but it's certainly developed over the decades quite a cult following through physical media, through its releases on VHS, screenings, cult cinema screenings, festival screenings, DVD, now Blu-ray, and quite rightly so, because this is a really clever, funny, as I say, quite dark in places, wacky film that brilliantly plays on all those clown cliches that we know from clowns in popular culture, clowns in circuses. Now, I'm not a coulrophobe or coulrophobic. Clowns leave me a bit, not bothered either way. Don't find them funny, don't find them scary. I know some people are genuinely terrified of clowns, and I just find them a bit boring in a way, I suppose. But I can understand how people do find them disturbing, because they are quite sinister, I suppose. These people who cover themselves in paint with these grimaces and colourful, garish costumes, they are quite disturbing, I suppose, but it just never has that effect on me. And I would say that any coulrophobics out there who've never seen Killer Klowns from Outer Space probably wouldn't want to watch this now. It is quite creepy, eerie, and genuinely disturbing, I suppose, but with a comedic sort of slant to it as well, which makes it quite unique, I think, in terms of that sort of horror cinema that we had in the 80s. And there were a lot of low-budget horror films which came out at the time. Some of them just disappeared and never really resurfaced, but some, like this one, have sort of had an afterlife. And as I said, it is interesting how there's merchandise. Even now, new stuff comes out. Funko Pops, action figures, T-shirts. There's a strange sort of cottage industry of things around this half-forgotten film from nearly 50 years ago. The film then it's very straightforward. It's a sort of an alien invasion story. As the film starts, then it's another normal evening at Crescent Cove. The local teenagers are up in Lover's Lane, romancing and smooching, and the Sheriff Mooney, the mature sheriff of the town, he's a bit fed up with kids rampaging about the town, and he's just had enough. He's lost patience and he throws them into custody for no apparent reason. Our two main characters, Mike Tobacco, what a brilliant name, played by Grant Kramer, and Debbie Stone, played by Suzanne Snyder. They're two teens, and I call them teens guardedly because they're clearly in their 30s. They talk about being in school together, but yeah, they haven't seen school for a very long time. Anyway, they're up getting to know each other. And suddenly there's a light in the sky. Something flashes through the sky. They go to investigate and they find a circus tent, which is in the middle of the woods, which wasn't there before. Something strange is going on, particularly strange when they find a way into the circus and are attacked by malevolent clowns. And they are malevolent and they're hideous. They're fascinating. They're an interesting creation because they are early animatronics. They've got these grotesque parodies of clown faces, huge and bulbous with great noses and twisted, deformed faces, bulbous bodies. And because it's early animatronics, they twitch and they move and they cackle and they've got these blood red mouths. They're really quite nasty looking things. Anyway, our heroes escape from the spaceship and they're chased by clowns. Eventually they cross the path of Dave, played by John Allen Nelson. He's a former boyfriend of Debbie, and of course he doesn't believe all their stories about spaceships and clowns and all that sort of nonsense. He takes them back to Sheriff Mooney. He certainly doesn't believe it. But as the story rolls on, it soon becomes evident that something nasty's going on in Crescent Cove. We see the clowns creeping through the town, attacking people in their homes. And this is where I think the film is very clever, because it uses, as I say, all that iconography, all those things we associate with clowns, and twists them and turns them for malicious intent in the film as they go about their business. Everything is here. Aboard the spaceship, there are red buttons on the walls, which are like clowns' noses, and they open doors and cause things to happen, jets of steam to come up and so on. The clowns, in a very amusing sequence early on in the film, they use a balloon animal and turn it into a tracker dog to follow Mike and Debbie as they're escaping from the spaceship. And this sort of thing goes on all through the film. Giant balloons are used as sort of prisons to bring people back to the spaceship. Creepiest of all, I think, is the fact that they use candy floss, or sugar candy as it's known in America. They have guns that imprison people in cocoons of sugar candy. It's a bit Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the sort of cocoon thing. And they're carrying these cocoons around, and the spaceship is full of cocoons of people that they've captured from the town. You also have custard pies which are thrown, which dissolve somebody. They are giant clown feet markers which are used in the police station at one point. It's all here. All the things that we associate with circuses and clowns are upended and turned evil, and turned dangerous and deadly. And it's very clever. It's a very clever script in that regard, in that the writers have clearly picked up on all this iconography and really thrown it all into this film. The story rattles along. Of course, things get more and more out of control. Mike, Debbie and Dave find their way back into the spaceship, and eventually things get crazy and crazier. This is a really fun film, and I've seen it a couple of times before, and I've always thought it was quite entertaining. Watching it tonight, I thought it was hoot and a half, frankly. It's a genius piece of B-movie fun, because the men behind the film, who wrote, directed and produced it, the Chiodi brothers, they were familiar with practical special effects and visual effects. That's their background. And this was their big calling card into feature filmmaking, showing what they could do visually. And they obviously did all the research or knew all the stuff about circuses and just threw it all into this mad melting pot of lunacy and quite dark horror, slapstick comedy here and there, because you've got custard pies being thrown around that dissolve somebody. You've got popcorn that turns into clown-headed snake creatures. It's really out there. I think the biggest shame about the film is that the Chiodi brothers never directed or wrote anything else. And it's odd, because you would think, even though this film didn't do well, you would think that people would look at this and think, well, wow, these guys know their way around a horror film. They know how to make a film. It's just a shame that they've never made anything else. But there's so much good stuff in here. It's so clever, and it is so inventive, using all the visual references of clowns and turning them around and making them terrifying. And the clowns themselves are really creepy, and the film is very good because a lot of it is set at night. The outside scenes, you see the clowns moving through the town, through the mist, turning up at people's doors and zapping them. It's very clever. It's very clever and very inventive and very funny. I think the humour largely comes from these two characters, these two brothers who run a ice cream van, and for some reason they seem to think they're going to sell lots of ice cream in the night when they're skidding around the town. I think they're called the Terenzi brothers, Rich Terenzi and Paul Terenzi. I think their humour is a little broad. It's very much sort of slapping each other, and you said we'd pick up girls through this ice cream van. It's a bit laboured, And I think that's the only negative I'd really have for this film. I found those characters slightly irritating, although they sort of come good in the end. It's such a good fun film. It is a fun film, and it is dark in places. You know, there's some nasty stuff happening, particularly I think at the end, because the end has the spaceship full of these candy floss cocoons that are full of the people in the town, and yet the spaceship, spoiler, is destroyed. So presumably all those people who were abducted by the aliens, they were all destroyed and killed. It is quite dark, but it has it really balances darkness and lightness and humour really well. It's a difficult tightrope to walk, and I think this film does it really very well. I really enjoyed this. It really is such fun, and like I said, it is odd that the Chiodi brothers have never been given a chance to do anything else. What's interesting is a film that didn't really do very well has had this long tail of all this merchandise stuff. There was a computer game which came out this year. And interestingly, even though it wasn't a big hit, I think there were sequels in development and a TV series in development. And if you want to talk about development hell, I think the Killer Klowns from Outer Space has been in development hell ever since the first film came out. There's still talk of new films being made. And I was researching the film, and apparently back in 2012, 2016, things were supposed to happen. Nothing's ever happened. And it is odd because there's a lot of stories, I think, to be told here. These aliens have come to Earth. They seem to be drinking blood. And that's quite a nasty sequence where you see one of the aliens sticking a straw in one of the cocoons and sucking out blood of the poor sod who's inside it. So there's stuff to be explored in this story. I mean, obviously, these are aliens who've come to Earth for sustenance for some reason, as one of the characters' reasons. Perhaps they've come from a dying planet and they need human blood and human flesh. It just seems there's a lot more to explore in this universe. And I would like to see more of it done. I think the problem is now that time's passed, it wouldn't have the same quaint charm because the visuals are great here. There's lots of practical visuals. There's a lot of matte paintings and matte shots, early CGI type things. But I think now it would probably have to look more sophisticated than this. I think that sort of homespun charm is what makes this work really well. It wasn't a massively budgeted film, it's to say $1 million or so, but it looked a lot more than that because there's so much going on. The sets are fantastic, and there's no expense spared in making sure that the vision that the script had of all the clowny stuff is brought to the screen so brilliantly. The spaceship set, and I've got to mention, of course, the giant clown who appears at the end, who is genuinely quite terrifying. It was a monster who appears and tries to stop our heroes escaping, and it's this massive giant thing. And that works really well the way they've done it. I mean, it's a man in a costume and it's miniaturized props, but it's really been composited very well. It's a really good film and I highly recommend it. If you like a bit of cheesy, schlocky horror, it doesn't get cheesier or schlockier than this. But, clown fans, having watched it again tonight, it sort of shot up on my estimation from something that I thought was corny and stupid. I really appreciated the artistry of it, and it's very highly recommended. As I say, it's just been re-released on Blu-ray and it looks great. It's a really good crisp transfer. You find it online, but it really is worth a look because it's a bit of a minor horror classic. Killer Klowns from Outer Space gets from me a big 9 out of 10, and that's no joke. Right, thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this video. It's nice to be back. I've had a couple of days off intentionally. One of the reasons is I did 2 Doctor Who videos last week, which took me a lot longer than I expected to edit. It was like 45 minutes things, but because I put so much stuff in with sound effects and pictures, it took ages to edit those 2 videos. And by the time I finished the second one on Sunday, I was YouTubed out for a day or 2, but I'm back now. So yes, if you are new here, you've discovered this video because you like Killer Klowns from Outer Space, or horror generally, or anything genre-y, anything cult, retro, it's all here on this channel. So you might as well like and subscribe. Press that button that says subscribe. Like, thumbs up, leave a comment down below. It's always nice to hear from you. And of course, you can check back through my archive of, I think it's about 504 videos, all sorts of TV, films and genre content. It's enough to make you weep. So anyway, stick around. I'll see you soon. Until I do, keep checking the stuff.